So 2016, as you know, was the year of surprises. And there's a list of just an incredible array of surprises, which of course makes the job of predicting and forecasting quite difficult. And when you do find somebody who has an ability to sift the noise from the news, as we say, we embrace them, because this was not a year we could have predicted. Although I will tell you, if you look at the YouTubes of Brian, you'll find out, by the way, everything he's done is on YouTube. You can check it out. And I tell you, we followed this guy since 2008, and he's called it right every step along the way. And if you want to find out for yourself, go look at some of the old YouTubes. It's all there. We don't make this stuff up. And of course, we arranged yesterday, especially for today, to break 2,000 on the Dow, 20,000 which my son reminded me. I said would certainly happen in this decade. I said it about 7 years ago. He found a slide from an old presentation I'd done, and he sent it to me and said, "Dad, I don't know if you remember, but you predicted this. It's ahead of schedule actually." But for those of us who are in the market, I'm not surprised. Many of us think there's plenty more to come. So here's the business we're in, really, is recognizing the power of this long-term graph. And you'll see a couple of things over here that I think are very powerful. First of all, you see what happened to $1 if you did absolutely nothing, zero. And that's the challenge, is to do nothing in the face of your instincts. And just let it compound in according to the big indexes. What you'll see is that the numbers are just absolutely stellar. When you look at small cap, much bigger than large cap, which is well validated, by the way. And both equity categories, all equity categories, have way outperformed bonds. So those are the things you've got to keep in mind, and way outperformed inflation as well, which totally dwarfed by the performance equities. The key, though, is to understand the volatility and to distinguish risk from volatility. Most people out there don't understand the difference. In fact, most of the graduates of great MBA school and finance programs will tell you they measure risk by volatility. We have a fundamentally different view of risk. We think risk is the opportunity or the possibility of permanently losing capital, and we see volatility as the market simply periodically overvaluing and undervaluing a group of great businesses. More of that another time. So the core is stock picking and market timing don't work for most people. And I've got a whole bunch of things over there. Barron's 2015 picks lost 6%. In 2015 versus 2% for the S&P. The 2016 picks of Barron's, and Barron's is one of the better publications, earned 3% against 12% for the S&P. George Soros lost $1 billion in 2016 on a wrong call, post-Trump. Yeah, there you go. Couldn't have happened to a more deserving guy. Carl Icahn's flagship fund lost 20% in 2016 after an 18% loss in 2015, and Buffett's famous bet that the S&P index would beat a hedge fund is winning handily, about 65.7% up versus 21% at last count. So we're, and of course we don't take bets. We don't do that stuff. We're not in the market timing. We're in what's called we're in the strategic wealth deployment area. We are not in the stock picking market timing business, as you know. So this is the market mechanism. This is what we play with. We allow the market to work for us. Basically, those people who think they can do stock picking assume that they have more information, better insights, more data than the entire market mechanism, the pricing mechanism in the market, which is a giant machine that sucks in all the data known about the company, the environment, the predictions of everybody, takes all of that universe of data and pumps it out in something called the price. And in the long run, the markets are efficient, although in the short run there are distortions. But we very much set the sails and let the markets do its work and then adjust them accordingly. Most people don't outsmart the other investors. If you look at a pool of active managers, and this is a 15-year period ending in 2015, you see that at the end of 15 years, only 43% survived. Only 43% survived, and only 17% beat their benchmarks. So why would you pay the huge fees and prices when you've got such a low chance of picking an active manager who's going to win? And then, if you pick the right one, you've got this huge burden called income tax. So it's not just what you earn, but it's what you keep. And many of you, if you ask your CPAs, will find out that your funds produced huge taxable gains. That's a big, big cost, which most people don't take into account. The way we design portfolios, most usually much of the gain is completely free of current tax. So if you compound in a tax-free environment over long periods of time, the result is dramatically different from harvesting a haircut off your portfolio every year to pay 40 or 50% of the gain that's realized to Uncle Sam and Sacramento. So what we do is that we basically let the market work for us, and we position assets to participate in a dynamic way. But you have to understand the biggest problem we face as investors, that we're genetically wired to be bad investors. I come from South Africa. If you go into the wild, you will see when animals feel comfortable, they herd. When they sense danger, they flee. Most people are happier buying to the market at 20,000 on the Dow than they were at 7,000 on the Dow. That's just the way it is. When people are sensing danger, they all run. And when people sense that it's really comfortable, they all pile into the market. So there is a whole series of mental errors that people make, but basically it all boils down to don't follow your instincts. They're the biggest enemy you have, and the chief job of investors is to suppress their instincts that will almost always lead them astray. And so you don't react to emotion. That is the key. The word that Charlie Munger uses for the correct mental outlook for equity investors is equanimity. Don't react with any feeling. Joy and elation are both dangerous. Clients call us and tell us how happy they are with their results. We tell them, please don't be happy. Don't be happy. It might encourage you to do the wrong thing. And so we're always what we call counter-cyclical educators. When the market's doing really well, we're tempering the expectations. Don't worry. Trees don't grow to the sky, as Warren Buffett says. This won't happen every year, cannot happen every year. It's great that it happens. Please don't react. And of course, when the market's not doing well, we tell them, don't worry. If the market loses 1,000 points on the Dow every day, in 20 days, we'll be out of business. So, we're counter-cyclical. I have this actually, this slide up at the back on the board. This is the first trust slide. And it talks about how the market rewards discipline. And it takes a 15-year period that shows you how $1 became $48 if you just had the ability to sit through every one of those cataclysmic news events. Every one of it shook people up. And the masses out there were frantically selling and predicting and forecasting. Those people who sat buckled in for the bumpy ride were handsomely rewarded. That slide is actually available when you pick up breakfast or a second helping of your breakfast, which I hope you will do. You'll see the slide out there. It's worth taking a look at it because it's a lesson in staying, as I said, buckled in for what is always a very bumpy but rewarding ride over time. This is the dangers of stock picking. If you miss the best, this is what happened if you don't have to look at the numbers, but if you held for an entire period, which is 1970 to 2015, the first blue line, and then if you missed the best 1 day, 5 days, 15 days, 25 days, if you missed the best days, you were absolutely cream. That's the risk of market timing. You can miss out on those spurts, which you never make up. Reading the headlines, following the newspapers is really, really a good contrarian indicator. It's a good reason to do the opposite. The most famous one is the Death of Equities Business Week 1979. If you bought that week, you were at the beginning of the most dramatic bull market in American stock market history. That was the day to buy. Take a look at Newsweek. They give you the big bad bear. Take a look at 1974. It was just near the bottom of that huge subsequent climb. There's a science action. Here's another one. Brazil takes off, 2009. I don't know if you know what happened to the Brazilian economy after 2009, but it was probably a 45-degree downward sloping curve until now. So that was Brazil takes off. It did, but not that way. It was a vertical explosion. It was a horizontal explosion, not a vertical liftoff. And of course, Money Magazine, February 2000, a month before the crash, talks about how hot the market is. Take a look at what happened to the NASDAQ right at the time they made that prediction. It's actually unbelievable. There are academic studies. Here we go. In the Financial Journal, a cover story is effective contrarian indicators. And this is the stuff you guys are reading. You're probably watching Jim Cramer, and which is the icon of everything we don't do. And this is the chart that shows you why you have to be diversified. Every one of those colors symbolizes another sector. No need to get into the details, but there's no discernible pattern. So everybody who tells you the next year is going to be one for small cap, big cap, mid cap, foreign, it's all nonsense. Press the delete button and move on. Nobody knows. There's no way to predict. None at all. There is no discernible pattern, and all it takes to find one and fail. So what is the RVW wealth system? Basically, we set the sales, and that means incorporating the factors that have historically outperformed. That is the key. We don't know what will perform, but we know that companies that are smaller tend to do better over time than companies that are larger. Companies that have a value orientation rather than a dramatic growth orientation tend to do better over time. Companies that have demonstrated strong and growing profitability tend to do better over time. Companies that have exhibited momentum in their business and their price have done better. Companies that pay dividends that are growing tend to do better. Companies that engage in aggressive buybacks tend to do better. So those are the factors that we overweight. We are broadly diversified. That's what we believe. We want to be plugged into the broad market and then tilt towards factors that have historically outperformed. That is what we call the science of capital markets. It's not about judgment. It's about what works. And by the way, every one of these factors should intuitively appeal to you as a factor that ought to affect markets. And if you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to discuss them afterwards. Secondly, we keep costs to a minimum because that is the headwind that messes everything up. You just simply cannot take huge amounts off for many undisclosed fees and costs. Many of the funds you're in have costs deep underneath and hidden in the net asset value calculation. Most of them, in fact, all of our new clients have no idea what they're actually paying in all. All they know is what they're paying their manager, but every fund they're in has its own set of fees, costs, and charges with multiple different names. Almost impossible to look it up. And we have Stefan Sobel, I'll introduce you to a little later, who is a refugee from one of the big firms. And we call Wall Street, by the way, the red light district of Manhattan. So for good reason. We redeemed him, and also, there's Lauren Gieses also. You'll meet them later. I'll introduce them. Lauren's also a refugee from the dark side. These guys can open up the hood and show you what's actually going on. And then we let the wind do its job. Position the sails, position the yacht, and let the wind do its job, and then adjust the sails as needed. That is basically the work that we do. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is we offer fiduciaries. That is very different from your typical family stockbroker who has no fiduciary duty to their clients. What they have is what's called a suitability requirement. Don't want to get into legal issues, just know the difference is vast. And we have a couple of lawyers in the room. If you have any questions afterwards, we can deal with it. But fiduciaries have to deal in your best interest and have to put your interests above their own. People who act in what's called a suitability simply have to determine that the investment is suitable. It does not have to be the most suitable. So if it has costs that are 2, 3, 4, 5 times what a low-cost ETF fund is, that doesn't matter. They can put that in. That's where they get their cruises from, their health insurance, their pension plan, all gets paid out of the extra vigorous that they take. So you want something that's transparent, liquid, and where you know exactly what you're getting, why it's in the portfolio, and how much you're paying. So that's the difference. So you already know what we do. It's all based on the research primarily of Fama and French. Eugene Fama won the Nobel Prize. By the way, if we at RVW sound arrogant, do not misunderstand. We are not arrogant. We're simply sitting on the shoulders of giants. And the great skill we have is to pick the giants on whose shoulders we sit. That's what we bring you. It is the wisdom that works. And we know that it's worked over 100 years of backtesting. Because we sit on the shoulders of people like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Brian Wesbury, Eugene Fama, Professor Jeremy Siegel. These are people who actually think. John Bogle. You can either have that crowd or you can have the Wall Street crowd, the Jim Graham types. There are many analyses on it I could take you through, but I'm not going to. This simply shows you what's called the small cap premium. Over long periods of time, small caps do better than large caps, not all the time, but you can see it over here. You can see it over here over 10 years. The small cap does way better than large cap. That's why we tilt towards small cap. You'll see, this is value minus growth. So you see over 10 years, value way outperforms growth. So we don't make this stuff up. We know what works. We simply have to apply it. And here you can see all of the premiums, and you can see over a 10-year period, the factors that we include outperform most of the time over long periods of time. Here you can see it. This is anyway, these are all multiple things. I just wanted to deal with 2 more issues, and then I'm going to hand over to Brian. This is one of the reasons we use First Trust as one of our key providers. This is one of their funds, and it shows you when you select scientifically, as opposed to simply using a broad index, you get the blue outcome instead of the green outcome. The blue outcome is there, the First Trust large cap core, and the green one is the S&P 500. You can see the blue has significantly outperformed the green one over a year, and it happens over all kinds of stuff. Here's another one. If you want to be in technology, most people will tell you to buy QQQ, right? Which is the NASDAQ cap-weighted index. That's what most people out there buy. We don't. The way we access technology is through the First called QTEC, QTEC. That's the blue one. So you see there are vast differences between what most people do and what we do. Because and Brian will hopefully get through that. I want to end with this. These are the 9 annual investors' resolutions that RVW advocates every year at this time. And I'll just read them to you because you may not be able to see them. Number 1, save more and spend less. Number 2, review my will to make sure it's current. Number 3, review beneficiary designations in my life insurance, IRAs, 401ks to make sure they are current. Remember that your beneficiary designations trump your will provisions. Most people don't know that. And we have a client right now who had no idea at all. He thought his will was governing his assets, they don't. Watch and read financial news for entertainment and not for investment advice. There's one thing you take away from this, and I know Brian will tell you the same. That's the core. Number 5, remember, I don't know more than the market. That's pretty much what I've been trying to say. Number 6, realize that what's happening now in the market will change, maybe for better, maybe for worse, but it will change. Number 7, don't let emotions control my investment behavior. Stick to my plan. Number 8, trust the financial science behind the way I invest. And number 9, enjoy life and put that at the front. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to hand over to Brian. Brian Wesbury.
And I want to tell you today that we are under new management. And the best way for me to explain this is out of the corner of our eyes, out of the corner of our ears, none of us can escape the news. All right, you were talking about headlines on magazines. You're in the grocery store. There they are. I sit on airplanes a lot. So there's a person in front of me or 2 rows in front of me, they're reading USA Today. I can read the headlines. All of that stuff. When you shop for something on the internet, that ad pops up all the time. Well, so do headlines from stories. Click on this and find out why Bush is an idiot, or Trump is an idiot, or Hillary is an idiot, or whatever. And all of that stuff invades our brain and makes us think about the world in certain ways, right? Out of the corner of our ears, and I'm going to tell you that a lot of that stuff misleads us. It sends us down a different path. And one of the things that's going to happen in these next couple of years, in my opinion, especially intensely right now, is that if you pay attention to what's coming in the corner of your eyes and the corner of your ears about politics, you're going to be misled. Right? Part of it was about whether Brexit would happen, part of it whether Trump could actually win, right? Nobody said it could happen. The establishment and the elite said no way. And also, with Trump resetting the world. I mean, look at the stuff with Mexico, right? And you can decide to be really terrified, and the elites and the establishment are terrified by this because it disturbs the world order that's been set up for decades and decades and decades. But no one knows how we come out the other side. No one, all right? And in fact, I think the world should be reset. And just because you have a tough time living with chaos doesn't mean Donald Trump does. In fact, I think he loves chaos, all right? During the campaign, at some points, I was like, I think I see his strategy. I think I understand it. During all his business years, he would get people in the other room, and he's either buying or selling a building, right? And he just wants people to go, I don't care. Just sell it to him. I don't want to beat him again, all right? Or I don't care. Just buy it. Let's get out of here. And part of that is going to go to the White House now. It's going to seem crazy because we've always tiptoed carefully around the world and trying not to upset anybody. But we do need a reset in many, many respects. I'm going off down this tangent a little too much, but I've been thinking about it a lot the last couple of days. But, if we pull back from NATO and the UN, what are the establishment going to say? It's going to sound just like when Brexit pulled back from the EU, right? Or when the UK pulled back from the EU. The world's going to fall apart. We're going to have a recession. There's going to be nuclear war. But if we pull away from the UN, or NATO, what are the UN and NATO going to do? They're going to come after us. We're the #1 funder. The world doesn't work without us. All right? They're going to come after us. All right? And so this idea that if we pull away, the world's just going to blow us off, they can't. They cannot. Right? Mexico can't blow us off. You may not want to meet right now, but I guarantee you the president of Mexico is going to meet, all right? Because he has to. We're too important. Their currency is already falling. Their stock market is already falling. And if he doesn't come meet, it's going to keep falling, and it's not going to be. It's going to be way worse for Mexico than it is for the United States. And so I kind of like this reset. Now I could be wrong, all right? But I'm not worried about this, and what I'm trying to say is, be careful. Try to put a filter up, because what you're going to hear, the establishment and the elite of the NHL told us that if John Scott was a captain, the tournament was going to be a wreck. It was going to be a joke. It was going to be terrible, and it ended up being awesome. Right? Brexit, they told us there's going to be a recession, and we're not having it. All right. And with Donald Trump, they told us the world would, the lights would all shut out, and energy would stop, and it's not happening either. So, having said all of that, one of the things that's happened for investors over the last 7.5, 8 years, and I love hearing, stick to your plan, watch out for emotion, because this last 7.5, 8 years, going back to 2008, lots and lots of people believe that capitalism itself failed, right? Banks got greedy, and they're evil, and they failed. And government had to step in and save us, and it was touch and go for a while, but it finally worked. And that's the narrative that has come out. And as a result, think about this. If you're an investor and you actually believe that free markets and capitalism fail, how do you know they're not going to fail tomorrow? Or next week, or the week after? And you can look at all those charts, but we haven't had an intense period like that where capitalism supposedly failed since the Great Depression. And so for the last 8 years, every week we've been hearing, this time it's real, this time the other shoe's going to fall, this time it's happened again, it's student loans, it's the BP oil spill, it's Brexit, it's Europe going to fall apart. It's every one of these little stories has told us that the world's going to end tomorrow, and it's really tempting to let your emotions take control and get out of the market, and as we've seen from these charts, that's the wrong thing to do. So let's go back and figure out why that's true. And before I do that, I want to talk about this. Last year, one of the biggest things that people talked about was that earnings for U.S. corporations had fallen for 5 quarters in a row. Okay, and if you look at this, there's the 5 quarters in a row. So Q2 of 2015 all the way to the second quarter of 2016. So the S&P 500 earnings were going down, and every time that's ever happened, we've had a recession, a bear market. It's awful, right? It's the end of the world. It's a pure signal to get out. So if you watch CNBC or Bloomberg or Fox Business, they were telling you this all the time, right? I never bought into that, all right? And I'm going to tell you why, and one of the key reasons in a minute. But when I looked at those earnings, I knew that the drop in earnings was caused by energy companies, all right? And energy, remember, oil fell from $110 a barrel to $28. Now, was that because of a good reason or a bad reason, right? Because some people were saying, oh no, oil prices fell because demand for oil and energy fell. And we knew, because we have really studied fracking, that the reason oil prices came down is because we went from 3 million barrels of production every day to 9.5. We were the world's largest oil producer, and we came out of the blue in 8 years. We were a moonshot. And that's why these energy companies had all invested like crazy in fracking. And by the way, that's a good investment. But when oil prices fell, these profits collapsed. And if you look at non-energy companies, those profits slowed down, but they didn't fall. And one of the reasons they slowed down was because oil was so prevalent everywhere. Not oil, but the business of drilling, right? Pipes and steel and pumps and trucks and railroad cars and everything that they use to frack. At one point, 3.5, 4 years ago, Texas had more job creation than the whole country did, right, in this recovery. That's how big it was. All right, North Dakota, for a 500 square foot studio apartment, you were paying $4,000 a month. They had to pay workers at McDonald's like $60 an hour. All right, you could make $150,000 a year to drive a truck because they couldn't get enough people to go up there. That's how big this boom was. So no wonder when oil prices fell, not only did earnings for oil companies get hit, but so did the rest of the country too, because it fed so much. But that was a temporary thing, and now what we're seeing is a true rebound in earnings. This is the quarter we're in right now, and we're actually up about 5%. We've got about 30 more companies in. If you look at this number, that's what we expect over the next 6 months. And over the next year, the consensus of all the analysts that follow all the 500 companies in the S&P expect 20% growth in earnings. It is a full rebound, and so I feel vindicated saying last year, oh, don't worry about the decline in earnings. It's because of a good reason, not a bad reason, and here we come back. Because I do agree it's very, very difficult to forecast, but if you can actually figure out when you might have a recession, and we'll talk about this in a minute, it is very helpful for investors. Okay, so having said that, let me move on, because one of the things that people, I want to go back to this 2008 period, right? So here's the crisis when the stock market fell. Then we bottomed in March of 2009, and we started our recovery, and that's lasted for the last 8 years. So remember this narrative. Wall Street caused the crisis, and government saved us. That's the story. By the way, it's the same exact story that they tell us about the Great Depression, right? And so I want to dissect that a little bit, because it's at the root of a lot of people's fears of investing. And I'm going to tell you, I don't believe it. I actually think government caused the crisis, and entrepreneurs saved us, okay? And let me put it this way. If you look at this slide in the market, every one of those red dots that you see, that's a Federal Reserve Board meeting. And at every one of those meetings back in 2008, they cut rates, they printed more money, they did something, they invented a new program, they used every letter of the alphabet to try to save us, okay? And I look at that chart and I go, man, the more they met, the worse it got. I mean, there's no evidence that they saved anything in there, right? And so, and in fact, remember TARP? When we bailed out all the banks, that's what we said we did. That was TARP right there. The market fell 40% more after TARP. TARP didn't save us, right? The market kept going down. In fact, financial stocks fell 80% in that next 5 months. Right? So what did finally turn it around? And I'm not going to go into this. If you want to ask questions about it, great. But what finally did turn us around is when we changed this little rule called, it's not little, but this rule called mark-to-market accounting. And I believe that rule was the thing that took a problem, subprime loans, and turned it into a crisis. And just before I move on, just so you know, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, government entities, owned 76% of all the subprime debt. Not Wall Street, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. If it weren't for our government, we never would have had the subprime loan market that we had. They wanted to get more people in houses, and they did. All right? And then this market-to-market accounting rule turned us around, and that's when our recovery began. And if you go back and look, as on our website, we wrote extensively about this rule. And on March 9th, it happened, and boom, we turned around. Now, I found this cartoon because it describes how I feel about all this stuff perfectly. So these are crayon people, okay? So here's the public. Look at that stern look, like something bad happened with these kids, right? Government and free market, those are our two kids. And look at government. He's going, he did it. But look at the color of the crayon on the wall. Government always does this. They can cause a problem right all over the wall and then blame it on the free market. Have you ever thought about this? Why does every government entity have a press agent? Why does the Federal Reserve have a press office? All right. Why does the Department of Commerce, Department of Energy, Treasury Department, all of them do? Does the free market have a press agent? Companies do, but most of the time those press agents are designed to work with the lobbyists and get things from the government. All right. They're not there to defend the free market. And so all those press agents from the government, what they do is they end up blaming the free market for problems. And I don't believe that's true. All right. In fact, I think just watching over history. And so my view is that that's exactly what happened. All right, now, I want to come back to this because a lot of people believe that the Federal Reserve, and that's what this is, the monetary base. The Federal Reserve, they did quantitative easing, right? They bought all those bonds, QE1, QE2, QE3, $3.5 trillion worth of bonds. I don't know how well read on the internet you are, but if you follow financial stuff on the internet, you couldn't have avoided. There's no way. This is out of the front of your eye and out of the middle of your ear, okay? Glenn Beck, Peter Schiff, Ron Paul, all right, Stansberry, all right, Stockman, the guy who used to work at OMB for Reagan. They have all got videos up on the web telling you the world's about to come to an end, all right? And at the end of them, they say, buy gold, get a 30-06, plenty of ammo, all right, canned goods, and move to the mountains, all right? Because the world's coming to an end, we're going to have hyperinflation, and by the way, they're technically correct. Technically, when the Federal Reserve buys $3.5 trillion worth of bonds and prints $3.5 trillion, that should create hyperinflation. It should, all right? There's no doubt. The problem is if you look at the actual size of the banks, and this is what we call M2, it's the money supply 2, it's all deposits and all banks, it didn't grow as fast as this. There's this triangle in here of money that never made it into the economy. So the Fed was printing all this money, but it never made it in. And why? The question is why. With one hand, the Fed jamming money in, with the other hand, we're regulating banks like never before, right? New capital requirements, Dodd-Frank, all of that stuff. And that's why this money never made it in, why we never had hyperinflation, why gold isn't $5,000 an ounce, why you're so glad you didn't put it all in canned goods, all right, and move to the hills. And so the bottom line is this didn't work. And my view is that this is not what created our recovery. It's not, right? See, because some people say it's all just a sugar high. And when the Fed raises rates, it's all going to go away. And you've just had a mirage happen in front of you, okay? And it's all due to the Fed. In fact, I was with Ben Bernanke about a year ago now down in Sarasota, Florida. Two big crowds of like 3,000 people. He spoke, and then I got to question him for a half an hour. And so he said in his speech, he goes, look, quantitative easing, because he did all this, remember? My press agents told you it worked. No, he said it worked. It worked, all right? Quantitative easing worked. Stock market went up. The unemployment rate came down. It worked. We had a recovery. We bounced back from the Great Recession. And I'm like, okay, Ben, if you're saying quantitative easing worked, why did GDP, our overall economy, only grow 2% a year? I mean, if all this money worked, why did we grow so slowly? And you know what he said? He did. No, he actually said, believe it or not, he goes, oh, that's not my fault. That's not our fault. Businesses didn't invest. That's why. We tried, but we couldn't get them to invest. They're just sitting on all this cash. They're paying back their stockholders. They're doing share buybacks. They're not helping the economy. And we got to fix that. And there was all. And so I'm like, all right, let's take a look at that. Here's business investment. Okay. Now, if there's a key word here, this is real. All right. Now, the opposite of real, just so you know, is not fake. All right. In economics, real means inflation adjusted. And if you look at that, we have never invested more as a share of our economy than we do today. Remember, this is as a share of GDP. Never invested more. So what's he talking about? Like, if we had all this real investment back here, why do people think businesses aren't investing? And let me explain. Real is a special number. It's inflation adjusted. How many of you own an iPhone? Like everybody, right? So the iPhone 6, I'm going to go back to that. I know we're on to the 7 now, almost probably the 8. But I know the math on this one. The mid-range one, the medium one, 64 gigabytes of flash memory. It's a hard drive on a chip. Flash memory was invented right back here, all right, when it finally became available. In 1991, 1 gigabyte of flash memory, you know how much it cost? $45,000. Brand new technology. Times 64 equals $2.88 million. And you bought that phone for $99 plus a 2-year plan. All right? When you can get $3 million worth of stuff for $99, it makes it look like you're not investing when you really are, right? And that's what's happening with the cost of everything in technology. And businesses are able to raise productivity and efficiency with very small investments. Think of Uber. They don't even show up on this chart because it's like 9 people in a garage with 4 computers, all right? Now, they do own a couple of self-driving cars, and they're up in Pittsburgh somewhere, but 95% of the cars that Uber uses are owned by the drivers, not by Uber, right? So how much investment did Uber make to be worth $66 billion? They have a bigger market cap than all the rental car companies combined, and they don't own a car, hardly, all right? And so this idea that you have to have all this nominal investment to create wealth, we live in a different world. And in fact, I want to spend 1 minute on this, and I'll get to the end here. A lot of people call what we're living in today a new normal. I do not like that phrase. I don't. And the reason is, I look out at investors every day in talks, and if I were you and I heard a new normal, I'd be scared. Because can anybody in here tell me, is a new normal good or is it bad? Was New Coke? What about New Coke? Like, New Tide, I think that came out in like 1977. I love that smell. I still use it, all right? You know, so it's like, is it new normal? Is it New Coke or is it New Tide? Is new long-lasting or short-lived? Is it good or is it bad? Nobody knows, you know? And so this idea that we're in a new world, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I do not like that phrase new. In fact, let me tell you, I do believe we've had a normal economic recovery. Now, I get it. There's news everywhere, Twitter, the world's moving really fast and all that, but it's been a normal recovery. And when I say normal, I'm using it in a qualitative sense, not 2% versus 4, 3, or unemployment of this or that. Stock market did this or that. I'm saying what causes growth? What is a normal reason for growth? And I'm going to tell you what it is: entrepreneurship, innovation, creativity, elbow grease, cleverness. So if you look back at this last 8 years, fracking gone from 3 million to 9.5 million barrels a day. I've already said that. The cloud, smartphones, tablets, apps, all of these things have happened in the last 8 years. You know, 8 years ago, almost to the day, basically, we mapped the human genome. All right? Supercomputers running 24/7, dry ice packed around them so they don't blow up and all that stuff. And it cost us $1 billion. It took a decade almost to crack it, right? And now, I just watched that commercial this morning. That lady scratching her head. Am I Irish? Am I Italian? You know, $79. She finds out, right? Not $1 billion, 79. That's all happened in the last 8 years. And Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen have never fracked a well. They do not know how to crack the human genome. They don't know how to read a DNA chart, all right? They have never stayed up all night, you know, drinking Red Bull, writing naps. None of them, all right? This idea, if you get in your head that the government creates all this stuff, you've lost the battle. And so what I'm telling you is we've had a normal recovery, and it's not caused by the Fed, it's caused by entrepreneurship, all right? Now, what your next question should be, okay, Wesbury, you're talking about all this great technology. Why are we only growing 2%? Why is the economy so slow? Why did people get so mad about economics that they voted Trump in? You know, because they wanted Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and everything else. It was more than just the PC stuff. It was everything, right? And I believe this is the answer right here. Government is just too darn big, right? If you think about technology that I just talked about, fracking, 3D printing, the cloud, smartphones, tablets, apps, big data, all this stuff. Those are thoroughbred technologies. Thoroughbreds. They can win the Kentucky Derby any day. All right. You look at these, but the horse has to carry a jockey. It's a weight on the horse, and that weight is government. All right. And when the jockey is 112 pounds, all right, you can win the Kentucky Derby. When the jockey is 188 pounds, you can't, all right? And my belief is that our growth in government has made a heavier jockey and made it harder for the horse to run, right? And that's why we're growing at 2%. Now, I want to point out two different kind of periods on this chart. Number one, I want to go back to here. Now, this is non-defense spending, and some people are disturbed by that. I'm not trying to play a game. I'm getting to what the government does to help people, right? Food stamps, welfare, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, spending, infrastructure, all the things we do, all right? And if you go back here, a lot of politicians will tell you, and in fact, some economists, all right, will say the 50s and 60s, that was the heyday of America, right? That's when the middle class was born. That's when people could get ahead. That's when the American dream was available for everyone, right? You've heard that before. And now it's not true. Right? Well, you know what? Back here, government was 6% on average of GDP. Do you know what it is today? Non-defense, 17.9. It's 3 times bigger. And if government truly made the economy a better place, then shouldn't we be doing better today than we did in the 50s and 60s, right? Because all of us went to school, we learned John Maynard Keynes. Government spending helps the economy. Cutting spending, austerity, hurts the economy, right? The problem is that it never worked that way. You know, Ronald Reagan was elected right here, and Bill Clinton left office right here. And if you look at government spending under Reagan and Clinton, I don't know about Bush. The Bushes like to spend. There they are right there. But if you look at that, let me clean this up. If you look at that, Reagan to Clinton, government spending went down as a share of GDP. And guess what? GDP grew 4% a year. Now it's gone up, and we've grown 2%. Keynes had it exactly backward. All right? The secret of Ronald Reagan, by the way, I guess we both can claim him, right? Because he lived in Illinois, went to college. He got an economics degree in Illinois before coming out to California. But he was so old that when he went and got his economics degree, Keynes hadn't taught yet. That was the secret, right? And so what's fascinating about this is if we want to get back to 4% growth, this line better come down, right? And I believe it will, right? I look at Trump as 3 different outcomes, right? The way you want to think of it. The best, the worst, I don't know what you want to call it, but he just stops, right? We already know he's not stopping. He's doing executive orders to roll back regulations and stuff like that. But if he just stopped putting more regulations in place, stopped letting taxes drift higher, stopped increasing spending, and sort of held the line. He's put a hiring freeze in place. Then what would happen is government would slowly fall as a share of GDP. Under Reagan and Clinton, they never actually cut government spending. They just kept it growing slower than our economy, right? And so if all he did was stop it, we'd be in a better place in 3 or 4 years, right? If he actually gets aggressive and burns the house down, which he could, right? He's got the House, the Senate, and the White House. We could see a major cut in spending, and he's talked about that. If he works on getting a few Democrats, all right, for every vote, then we're somewhere in the middle. But it doesn't matter from my perspective. One way or another, this is heading down. As a result, that jockey is going to start weighing a little bit less. And I believe that the horse, the economy, is going to start running a little bit faster. When you put that together with the earnings that I showed you already, accelerating, my belief is that the market is going to continue to rise in the years ahead. I am very bullish on this. One last quick point, and that is, the Fed's jamming in all that money with one hand. They're slamming regulations with the other hand. Dodd-Frank and all those things. What's Donald Trump going to do with regulation? He's going to release some of it, right? It's not going to be as bad. And as a result, my belief is all that money that the Fed did put in is going to start getting in, leaking in, if that's what you want to think about, how you want to think about into the economy. And that will boost inflation and interest rates in the years ahead. So I really do believe, the long-term chart of stocks outperforming bonds. We've had a 35-year, once in a multiple generations kind of bond market rally, and I think it's over. And inflation and interest rates are going to start start heading higher, not rapidly in the years ahead, but they're going to continue to rise. And then if we look out next 2 or 3 years from an economic point of view, I believe the stock market's going to outperform the bond. So we are under new management, and I'm telling you, get ready because it's going to be wild. And out of the corner of your ears and the corner of your eyes, if you want to think of it as the mainstream media, they're going to be freaking out. What I would highly recommend is that you don't let yourself get freaked out with them, because it's going to be an interesting 4 years. Thank you very, very much.